here to do the devil's work.
Welcome back to another review in my month of horror here on the channel. Today we're going to discuss what has been known as the scariest movie ever made, and one that made a deep impact on cinema, has been imitated, replicated, and parodied, but never outdone over the last 50 years, and nothing has ever come close to touching the original, The Exorcist.
Is there someone inside you?
Sometimes.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Avoid conversations with the demon. The demon is a liar. He will mix lies with the truth. The power of Christ compels you!
Also, I know I said I'm dropping a horror review every Friday of the month, but since this week has a Friday the 13th and I'm releasing my massive Friday the 13th retrospective video, I figured this week's video I would just release on Thursday, do it a little bit early instead. So let's get right to it. The Exorcist was released in 1973, forever raising the bar when it comes to horror movies, originally based on a novel by William Peter Blatty, who also even wrote the screenplay for the film, so you know it's an authentic vision. It was directed by William Friedkin, who unfortunately just passed away not too long ago, so shout out to him, rest in peace. He was a legendary artist responsible for many great films, but I think a lot of people would say that The Exorcist is his masterpiece, and I don't know if they would be wrong about that. It's a movie that preys on the fear of the unknown and uncertainty, and also, of course, that of evil that we don't understand, about how we respond in the face of a darkness that we can't even begin to comprehend, about the lengths that we will go to help an innocent person overtaken by a horrific circumstance, and a potential reality that no matter how we may feel about the existence of evil, evil does not care if we think it exists or not, and it's going to continue to exist regardless. Before I get into the story and synopsis, I want to say something very particular about the tone of this movie. Even though there are some themes of hope and overcoming trauma which is involved here, I think part of what makes this film feel so scary is just the overall atmosphere of it and the helplessness of it all. There is no levity in this movie, no comic relief, no moment to let you exhale from the tension. The tone of this movie is utterly dark, and even most of the scenes without the possession in full display just feel destitute and despairing the entire time. It's one of the biggest benefits of this movie, but also something that I think very few movies can actually pull off. The movie actually opens during an excavation in Afghanistan. It's a prologue that introduces the old priest named Father Merrin, who actually won't even appear in the movie again until the very end. He basically kind of bookends the entire experience, but I won't say that I fully understand what the opening is artistically meant to be, but my theory is it's kind of like a forlorn premonition. Merrin senses that something is off, something feels strange, almost like he's having a premonition of his own death, culminating when he stares down the statue of a demonic entity named Pazuzu. Now, Pazuzu is never mentioned in the movie itself, but that is the demon that possesses Regan, even though the demon calls itself the devil later on. I remember most people always describing this movie saying it's about a little girl that gets possessed by the devil specifically, but apparently it's a demon named Pazuzu instead, which the version we see in the film is entirely fictional, created by the author, but it is based on several existing demonic legends, including one named Pazuzu from Mesopotamian lore, who was a demon of the winds and also brought plague alongside it. The movie then shifts to an urban setting, and for a while it focuses on two separate storylines. One of them is about an actress named Chris, played by Ellen Bernstein, and her daughter Regan, played by Linda Blair. A lot of the time is spent showing their loving relationship together, and they're the least that you would expect to be involved with anything demonic, but that's why it works. Regan is just an innocent victim, a 12-year-old little girl that has done nothing to deserve her eventual fate. The other storyline follows a priest and therapist named Damien Karras. He's struggling with his own faith at the moment while simultaneously dealing with the death of his mother, basically putting him in his lowest and most distraught part of life, constantly wondering why he's even bothering and if what he's doing is right, and debating whether or not to leave the area or even his faith. The first half of the movie can feel pretty slow, especially if you go into it after hearing all the hype. The real horror doesn't start until about an hour in, but I would also argue that the first hour, though necessary for building up and understanding the characters, also has a different kind of horror involved with it, and that's the feeling of uncertainty and hopelessness that I was mentioning before. Regan starts feeling and acting strange, and the whole demonic possession happens very slowly over time. At first, they're just taking Regan to the hospital to figure out what's going on with her, and time after time, test after test, they find nothing. They say that she's fine, that it might all be in her head, and that this feeds into the fear, or maybe the experience that some of us can relate to, just not knowing how to help someone, or just not knowing what's wrong with us. There was a time several years ago that I was going back and forth to doctors and to pain clinics and all that, and I was trying to figure out what I was experiencing, and I never really got many answers. It's incredibly frustrating, and you are put through test after test, scans, all the poking and prodding, people looking at you like you're crazy, and all the while, the pain is there and just won't stop. I can't imagine even being a parent and watching your child go through all that, all these procedures without having any clue what's going on or why she's hurting this bad or how to help her. And it's something that is genuinely terrifying. Nobody wants to go through all of this or feel like you're crazy or just plead to the doctors and tell them the truth and then have them act like nothing is actually going on. We know a lot more about mental health today than we did back in 1973 when this movie came out, but the lengths and efforts that the movie takes to rule out everything or explain how the mind's perception and belief can influence what it feels and experiences, it's pretty impressive considering when this movie was released. Any other horror movie would just jump into, oh yeah, it's a demon, but this movie really rules out literally everything else one by one. And it's only during this journey to figure it out that Regan begins to lose her consciousness to the demon and it begins to take over her body. One of the most shocking scenes is when the demon begins stabbing a crucifix into its vagina over and over again as a pure display of the raping of innocence and also any disregard for spiritual safety. Her body begins to contort, you have the classic head spin, throwing furniture across the room, and suddenly you realize that this situation has become more serious than you ever thought possible. Chris eventually meets with Father Karras, begging him to meet with Regan in an attempt to perhaps do an exorcism. He enters into it in disbelief as anyone else, but eventually realizes evil is within her and enlists the help of a seasoned priest, Father Marin, from the very beginning of the movie, and the two of them arrive preparing to try to save the young girl's life. And this is where everything goes down. This is the scene that people remember. The demon does everything it can to try and psychologically break down its characters and disgust them to weaken their concentration and their faith. It gives the most intense insult that's ever been dished out in a film. It tells Karras that his mother sucks cocks in hell.
Your mother sucks cocks in hell, Karras.
That is just cold. There is no line, I don't care, anywhere else in cinema that is that cold. His mom just died. Insane. Speaking of being cold, the room itself was literally freezing. All that breath you see from the actors talking, that's real. The room is claustrophobic, it's freezing, and it's just taking place in this tiny bedroom where there's nowhere to escape to. You are being forced to deal with a demon whether you like it or not. And there's so much that happens here, I can't possibly summarize it all. A lot of it's internal, a lot of it is shocking, a lot of it is great practical special effects. It's just everything you want it to be. From the bed shaking to the vomit spewing, and it'll have you questioning if you would have the willpower to stick it out, or if you would just run away shitting your pants, which probably most people would. It's the ultimate battle of good versus evil. Even if you don't think of evil as a literal physical entity, you can kind of look at it as the destructive voices in all of our heads. The more that we give it energy, the more insecure and weak that we feel, which just leads us to anger and self-destruction. Just as Father Marin's premonition in the beginning, he eventually comes to meet his end at the hands of Pazuzu, and then it's the broken Father Karras who has to finish the job all by himself. Left with nothing but himself to rely on, but in the face of true evil, finds what can be considered true good. Karras never met Regan, the girl. He doesn't know her. He doesn't know her family. His issues have nothing to do with theirs at all. His plotline was completely separate until this moment. But despite all this, he gives the ultimate sacrifice, giving his body and soul to the demon in order to expel it from Reagan. And in just one brief moment of control, when the demon enters his body, he sacrifices his life by jumping through the window and falling to his death. But I think that's kind of the light in the darkness. It's horrible that he had to die, but being willing to die for somebody that you don't even know just to save them from a horrible fate is complete selflessness. It's unbiased love. And if you are religious, well, that's what the faith is supposed to be all about before the corruption of establishments and mankind. It's genuine selfless purity that destroys the demon. The Exorcist is an unforgettable film, and it has a clear artist vision behind it, both from the direction and the screenplay. It has characters that you actually care about and can understand and empathize with, and it has special effects that were amazing for the time and still look incredibly good today. Though nothing tops the original, The Exorcist had several sequels, including one that just came out this year, bringing Ellen Bernstein's character back, but from what I'm hearing, it's a mess and full of cringy dialogue that shits all over the original. The Exorcist to me never felt like the kind of film that would need or warrant a sequel in any way. Of course, it's the box office that determines that, and that's the downside of cinema, but it really felt like it should be a standalone film, and is one of those rare horror films that broke through the mainstream boundary and even won some Academy Awards. There is nothing else like it, and I think it's an essential watch for any horror fan or any film nerd in general. It's a must-see. So what do you guys think of The Exorcist? Are you a fan of it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it's overrated? Underrated? I don't think anyone thinks it's underrated, but let me know what you guys think about The Exorcist. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and comment. I'd really appreciate it if you did to help it out in the algorithm, and subscribe to the channel because I'm dropping a new horror movie review every Friday of the month. And on Friday the 13th is my huge Friday the 13th retrospective video, 6.5 hours detailing the entire franchise from start to finish. You won't want to miss that. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. I do appreciate it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next Friday with another review.